Welcome to The Faith Space. We are your hosts, Kate Newell and
Dylan Doyle Burke. The Faith Space is a leadership development organization dedicated to creating a holistic, sustainable world cultivated through personal empowerment and systemic transformation. Join us in reclaiming our connection and reviving our faith.
Our guest today is Senator Jeff Bridges, Colorado State Senator from District 26. And Jeff says if anyone knows where District 26 is, he'll buy you a cup of coffee, any of our listeners. So follow up on that. Jeff is...
No Googling. That's cheating.
Okay. Jeff is a graduate of Harvard Divinity School. He has his Master's of Divinity. He also worked as communications director for Union Theological Seminary, City of New York. And he is a good friend of mine from way back. He comes from powerful people, really an amazing family, great stock, and of course, an Arapahoe High School graduate. So
proud Arapahoe warrior.
Represent. We come from the same town, Littleton, Colorado, and it is such an honor to have you here, Jeff.
Thank you very
sitting
much for
senator, my senator, actually.
Oh, nice.
So it makes it really personal, and we always like to start with a welcome in your faith space. So where are we? Why are we here? Give us some context.
So we are currently in the Colorado State Senate. Full stop. We are in the Colorado State Senate. This is where the magic happens. So the walls are red, which I find a little oppressive, but apparently the walls in the Senate are red, and in the House they're green, because in the House of Lords in England the walls are red, and in the House of Commons in England the walls are green. And so when folks were deciding what colors to paint the walls, they based it on that. And I overheard that from a tour guide as I was working at my desk one day. So I hope that's true. But that's what the tour guide said.
Do you feel like
anyway.
a lord in this space?
Oh, it is a very different place from the House. So I was in the State House for 2 years. The comparison I use is the House is like a middle school. It's really energetic, and there's cliques and all the other things that go with middle school. And then the Senate is more like a one-room schoolhouse. You are just, everybody is in everyone's face all the time, and everyone is just so important. And if you doubt that, then just ask, and they will let you know how important they are. So it's a totally different feel. It's half the people, but it feels like a much, much smaller group. The possibilities here are very different from the House.
It is very special to be able to have a podcast recorded in the Colorado State Senate
I hope
room
this is okay.
on the floor.
I hope I don't get in trouble for this later.
It's okay with me.
You're a lord here, Jeff.
That's right. I don't know.
So, or should we say Senator Bridges?
I mean,
Senator Bridges, that's
in
true.
these parts.
It's fine if you call me Jeff.
Jeff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeff the Senator.
Or Senator Bridges, if you prefer, or El Duderino, if you're down to the whole brevity.
So this is something I did want to clear up. So you are not the musician.
The actor?
Yeah, he released an album at some point.
He did release an album. You're right. On his Wikipedia page, there is for the album released by Jeff Bridges, click here, and then it says for the Colorado politician, click here. So I made it. I am on Jeff Bridges' Wikipedia page. I appreciate that his Twitter. I moved quickly on the Twitter, and I got at Jeff Bridges, and he is. I really hate that real Jeff Bridges. That would be like very insulting, because I'm a real Jeff Bridges. I think anyone that has that in their Twitter profile is probably compensating for something. But I am Jeff Bridges, and he is the Jeff Bridges, and I will give that to him. He is the Jeff Bridges. That's just facts.
No, you're definitely a Jeff Bridges.
I'm a Jeff Bridges. A dude, not the dude.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, going back to where we are.
We're in the state Senate.
And you name this as your faith space, or a faith space.
A faith space. I think that if we are the hands and feet of God in the world, and in a democratic republic, in a representative democracy, we are as citizens. The government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And again, if we're the hands and feet of God in the world, and the government is us, then this is where we practice caring for each other. This is where that hands and feet of God in the world comes to life. This is where we work. This is where we do that work. I think more so than in any other form of government, we have a responsibility to work towards justice.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like I grew up in this building as well. I started working here at 18. But it's really, you have a different perception because you came from seminary. So you have a master's of divinity. So I see how that ties in a little bit here, but can we backtrack a little? Why did you go to seminary? Did you want to be ordained? And what is your tradition? What is your theology a little bit around?
Sure. So I will say I'm the only member of the legislature right now with a Master's of Divinity. So just me. And I'm a Democrat, so figure that one out. And my sort of faith background, my story is in high school, so I went to Arapahoe. I grew up sort of agnostic and went to Sunday school with some friends of mine on Wednesdays. That's when it was, at Arapahoe, just to sort of figure out what...
As you do, you think it would be on Sunday,
you think Sunday school,
Wednesday.
Yeah, and just, try to explore it. Youth pastors, God bless them, they did not have the capacity to answer the kinds of questions I had. And so that didn't really take. Went to college and took a class on the binding of Isaac. Actually, the class was called Quest for Justice, and one day we studied the binding of Isaac. And through talking about what happened in that story, the professor described Abraham as having this voice in his head, and the voice was telling him crazy things, and he had to decide either he was insane or this really was God. And there was no reason to believe one or the other. It was a choice that he had to make. And so that was the first time I really saw it as a choice, right? Like faith is neither rational nor irrational, it's irrational. It's not like the lights are off in a dark room and you believe that there's a black cat somewhere in the room, and if you could just turn the lights on, you'd see the cat. There is no cat. It's not the kind of thing that you can prove. It's something that you either choose to believe or not. And that was the first time that possibility ever really was open to me. And then I was in D.C., and I was very unhappy and just wanted to go experience something beautiful. And so I went to the National Cathedral in D.C. for an evensong service. And it was this beautiful choral service in one of the most beautiful places in the world. And there was a woman presiding, and she talked about social justice. And it was the first time I ever left a church feeling closer to God. So I'm like, what is this place? And looked into it. It's an Episcopal cathedral, and looked into the Episcopal Church. For historical reasons, the Episcopal Church is much more focused on the questions than the answers, having to do with Bloody Mary and Queen Elizabeth and conflicts between the Anglicans and the Catholics. And Elizabeth said, just go to church, stand up, sit down. I don't care what you think you're doing while you're there, just do that. And so even more so than a lot of other traditions, Episcopalians believe that we're one body because we share one cup, not because we all believe the same thing about the cup. So it's not about that belief system so much as it's about the liturgy and the structure. And so I got really drawn in, went to catechumenate, which is sort of like Episcopal training for folks who are joining the church. And the first class was on sin. And I'm like, well, here we go. It's a heck of a way to start.
Yeah, right.
And so by the end of the class, the definition of sin that we came to was anything that gets in the way of the relationships that God wants you to have with other people, with yourself, with God, and with creation. And I'm like, that's great. It's super contextual, and it's not gluttony, sloth. It's not this list of things to do and not do. It's situational. It's contextual.
It's also not blind faith, and it's not defined as some sort of creed that you have to recite. You get to define it to a certain degree.
Exactly. The catechism for Catholics is very large. The catechism in the Episcopal book of the Book of Common Prayer is like pages, and it just asks questions and leaves the answers pretty open. And I love that. I love that about my faith tradition. So I joined the Episcopal Church, and then the lessons were over, and I wanted to keep learning. I mean, I had a whole lot of years to make up for it. And so I applied to divinity school. And for me, I'd looked at some other places, but it really came down to either Harvard or staying here at home and going to Iliff. And so Harvard let me in, and if they're dumb enough to let me in, I'm not dumb enough to say no. So I did 3 years at Harvard to get my MDiv, and it was fantastic. I loved it. I joked that it was penance because I'd worked on a lot of political campaigns before then, but it's only sort of a joke. Campaigns can be really hard on the soul, as you know very well, with your experience there.
But you also met the love of your life.
I did.
In seminary. Who is a badass woman in her own right.
She is. Much
Soon to
smarter
be
than I am.
Dr.
That's right.
Bridges.
That's right. Dr. Anne Marie Masika's Bridges.
Yeah.
She's amazing and much smarter than I am. And in politics, people always introduce their beautiful wife or something like that. And I always introduce my brilliant wife. And she is also beautiful. But people who haven't talked to her sort of snicker at that because it's politics. And there's still much sexism in the world, believe it or not.
Wow.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
so
I
shocked
know.
to hear this, Jeff. It's really,
We experience it. And then they talk to her for like a minute and a half, and they realize that she's getting her PhD at Harvard, and they're like, oh no, she really is brilliant. And she really is smarter than me. That's fine. I'm very smart. I have no, it's not like I'm not self-deprecating in that. She's one of the most intelligent people I've ever met.
Has she impacted your faith journey?
Huge. Yeah, she's deeply Calvinist. And so it's interesting when Bloody Mary, Queen Mary, was on the throne, a lot of the folks that had sort of founded the Anglican tradition escaped to Geneva and hung out with Calvin. And so there's a lot of Calvinism. When they came back, there's a lot of Calvinism sort of woven into the Anglican Church. And the Episcopal Church is the Anglican Church in America. We're the Episcopal Church because the Anglicans wouldn't give us a bishop. But the Scottish Anglicans, the Episcopalians, would give us bishops so we could make our own bishop. There's all sorts of rules about how many bishops it takes to make a bishop. Anyway, so the Episcopal Church in the United States, they didn't want to give us that power. So we're the Episcopal Church.
But you and Anne Marie are both Episcopalian.
No, she is Calvinist, and she grew up in the Dutch Reformed Church. She went to Denver Christian, and so she's deeply Calvinist. She doesn't like church though.
I hear that.
Yeah.
I also do.
I hear that.
I do strongly.
I like high church. I love high church.
You're Episcopalian.
I know,
That sounds
it's great. It's the singing with your hands in the air about Jesus that just really feels that.
I will say too.
That chafes for me.
I want to share with our listeners, just because we love stories. We had another couple on who was also spiritual as well. I just want to tell all the listeners briefly that you met your wife because you were both.
Do you want me to tell the story?
Yes, please.
All right, so it was Admitted Students Day at Harvard Divinity School, and so the way she tells it is there's this cafeteria line sort of thing. It was a buffet. She has her tray of food, and it was like a flashback to middle school. She's like, who am I going to sit with? I don't know any of these people. And from across the room, she sees a guy wearing cowboy boots. And so she comes up, and she goes, hey, nice boots. And I look at her, and she's well-dressed, she's beautiful. I assume that she is some East Coast snob making fun of my cowboy boots. And so I kind of get in her face, and I'm like, look, I'm from Colorado, okay, so I can wear cowboy boots. And she gets right back in my face and says, yeah, I'm from Colorado too, and I like your boots. So obviously I married her.
Right, absolutely.
It's the only recovery.
But also,
logical next step.
Yeah.
That's what a spiritual thing that you both grew up miles from each other, just really right down the road. And you had to go all the way to Harvard Divinity School to find your soulmate.
Well, also 8 years. It would have been awkward if we dated while I was in high school. And illegal.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's steer clear of what that means.
But do you view it as like a spiritual, I don't know, I actually don't know what the Episcopals believe about things like fate, or what you personally believe about things like
destiny,
fate, or soulmates.
I don't know. I mean, I think this is true for a lot of people. It goes in and out. There are times when I'm feeling more connected to the divine, and there are times when I really struggle and I'm really angry. About a month after my first election, my younger brother passed away from a heart attack. Just super random, no drugs in his system, anything like that, just heart attack at 27. And so you look at that, and it's been a hard relationship with God from there. I think at the time, I definitely, so after we had that interaction over my cowboy boots, we interacted a few more times, and I was getting close to time to catch my flight, and I tend to push it pretty hard anyway, but I pushed it a little more, and because I was looking for her everywhere, trying to find her to get her number and just her email address and stay in touch. And as I was walking back to the cab stand, this is back before Uber, so I was walking back to the cab stand in Harvard Square, and I was like, all right, God, if you don't want me to know this woman right now, then I get it. That's fine. And I was getting in a cab, and I hear this person go, Jeff? And I look up, and it's her. And she goes, you're going to the airport? And I go, uh-huh. And she goes, do you want to share a cab? And I go, yes! And then she's like, well, I need to go get cash. I'm like, no time. Come on, go. And so 2 years later, it's our third year at Divinity School, and it's Admitted Students Day again, and I take her to the cab stand, and I get down on one knee, and I ask her if she'll marry me, and this time she says yes.
Oh, wow.
I love it.
Full circle.
Wow. How do you hold that intention in terms of like an idea of like God's plan or not with your younger brother's death?
It's hard. It's super hard. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Do you feel like your calling as a senator, like your job, is that divinely inspired? Is that destiny for you to be doing this work in this way? And does that link at all to the transition of your brother?
I mean, I certainly use the word calling when I describe this. You know, it's I worked in politics for a long time. There's so much good that you can do in government. I mean, there's just the money itself. You know, there was a day last year when I was in the House where some folks made a deal on funding for education, and I thought they were leaving millions of dollars on the table. And I thought that our kids deserved more. And so even though the lobbyists had cut a deal with some folks in leadership, I was just livid. And so I called every education lobbyist I could think of, and I chewed them out. And I was really quite mean. I don't think I've ever been that mean to people here in the building, because they were screwing our kids is what they were doing, and I was just livid. And so the next day, we got $25 million more. It's like, you know, what other job can I do where in a day I get $25 million for kids? And not just that 1 year, but that's ongoing funding. If we hold the negative factor, we can get into education policy. But anyway, if we hold funding for education steady year over year, that's $25 million every year that came from, that wouldn't be there if I hadn't been there to yell and scream and throw a fit. So, you know, there's so much good you can do in this job, just so much good.
Do you feel like you said earlier, like hands and feet of God? Is that different or similar as to, like, do you feel like a channel for God? Like, do you feel like when you cast a vote, you are connected to Spirit, or are you kind of representing Spirit, or what is that relationship?
I don't think about that. That's not something that enters me when I'm voting. Yeah.
What kind of spiritual practices do you have in this building?
Oh, your mom once told me that as she goes up and down the stairs, she would sing hymns to herself to, like, fortify her against the trials in this building. It's hard. You know, this building is hard, and you know, I think that one of the ways that I try and conduct myself is with humility and with love for all of the people that I'm interacting with, even the people who are just so wildly wrong, painfully wrong. And, you know, there's a humility you have to have. So my master's thesis was on negative theology as political theology. And negative theology is this 5th century, it goes back to 5th century Christianity, and it's the idea that God is beyond anything we could think of, is beyond any definition. Anything that we could think of is God is more than that. So the only true thing you can do is to unsay the things you've said. So it's called apophaticism. Anyway,
Very complex.
the idea is that you can't know what God's will is, but you can still operate within God's will. You can still do good things, right? Like you can still. You can't know God's will, but you can work in alignment with God's will. But because you can't know what God's will is, you always have to maintain an epistemological humility. You have to know deep down that you could be wrong. And not only that, but God's will could be that you're fighting with this person. God's will, it could be God's will that you feel passionately about where you are, and this other person also feels passionately about where they are, and you fight it out. I mean, God used Pharaoh, right? God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh was an instrument of God in that case. he was wrong and terrible and horrible, but he was as much an instrument of God in that case as anyone else in the flight from Egypt. So you just have to go about it with humility and just
Because you never know when you're going to be Pharaoh.
You never know.
You never know
it's
if you're
true.
Pharaoh or Moses. Sometimes.
That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, you never know if you're Pharaoh or Moses.
I just want to clarify, earlier you said your mother, you're talking about Senator Linda Newell, which is
Yes,
Kate's.
when I said your mother, I meant Kate's mom.
Just for listeners out there, I just want to make sure.
Dylan's mom.
Well, we can talk about my mother sometime. She's also a wonderful woman.
I'm sure. Sure.
I was curious in the time that we have remaining when you talk about the immense amount of good that you can do in this position. I think it's in vogue to cast politicians and people in political office as doing a certain level of not good, or some people might say evil or sin, as we were talking about earlier. Do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share on that?
Yeah, there are at least some very prominent elected officials in this country that I think really work every day at dividing us and doing whatever they can to win a political victory and not to win a victory for the people they represent. And you see that more and more in Washington. I'm really proud that here in Colorado, 96% of the bills that we passed this last year were bipartisan. And 100% of the bills the first 2 years I was here, because the Senate was controlled by Republicans, so anything that passed had to have bipartisan support. But we have full control, Democratic control of the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. We don't have to have Republican votes. And yet the bills we passed were of a kind that 96% of them had Republican support at some point along the way, and half of Republicans voted in favor of 2/3 of the bills we passed. So it's not just like there was 1 or 2 Republicans voted for everything. There was a huge number of Republicans that supported the things that we were doing in the Democratic majority. And that's because we, I think, in this building prioritized passing good policy. Not just getting political wins that we can take back to our voters and thump on, but really doing what's in the best interest of the people of Colorado. Sometimes it's not always super popular, but we try and do what's best. And I remember thinking even in 3rd grade that people didn't respect the public service the way that I think that it deserved to be respected. And I think maybe that's just a feature of American politics, that politicians are always under assault. I think right now it's especially true, though. And if we don't believe in our elected officials, then we stop believing in the process. We stop believing in government. And when that happens, when people lose faith in government and they don't think that government is doing what it is that they want, it's not like we slide into some libertarian utopia where government just slowly recedes and the private sector, fills in. It's tyranny that leads to. When the trains don't run on time, and someone says, "I'm the only one who can fix this," that's not conducive to the future of democracy. And even though, as Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. We haven't found something better. And I know there will be some people saying, we live in a republic, not a democracy. Well, we live in a representative democracy, which is a form of democracy. So yes, it is correct to say we're both a republic and we are a democracy. So you can Google that if you want to, but either one is accurate. I get in Facebook fights on this all the time. People I say, "Oh, this is good for the democracy," and people go, "We're not a democracy." Whatever.
Love that answer.
Thank you.
Especially someone who has a political and spiritual background. So we just have a few minutes left, and we'd love to ask you some rapid fire questions.
Can I actually just go a bit deeper on the respect for politicians piece? So this is actually, I think, the biggest challenge we face right now is the lack of faith that people have in their elected officials. And so I think it is the most dangerous thing we have right now because of what it could lead to politically. And certainly income inequality is an enormous challenge we face. The environmental crisis is something we have to address. Right, It is a crisis. There are all sorts of enormous challenges we face. We won't be able to overcome any of them if our government breaks down. So I think that the biggest challenge we face is restoring a sense in folks that they can trust their government. And so when...
And you use the word faith in.
I mean, I think that's...
So you're on the Faith Space podcast. I just wanted to pull that out.
Good tag.
Yeah, thank you.
That's good. So, when I knock doors, I work really hard to listen. The way we knock doors on my campaign is not knock, knock, read the script, can I count on your vote? The way we knock doors is knock, knock, hi, I'm Jeff Bridges, I'm your state senator. This last year I got $500 million for education. We're working on transportation and would love to hear what it is that you care about. And they sort of look at you and they're like, you want to know what I care about? And getting people to have a conversation, they just want you to leave, right? When someone from in politics shows up at your door, people just want you to go. And so they're trying to figure out, how do I get this person to go? And what you have to do is convince them the way you get me to leave is by having a conversation with me. And then once they start having a conversation, they don't want you to go. Mm-hmm. And it's a totally different experience for them. The way most campaigns knock doors is super dehumanizing. It instrumentalizes the person as nothing more than a vote. And it instrumentalizes the door knocker as nothing more than the seeker of that vote. And what we really try and do is have connections between people. It is about the person knocking the door and the person whose home we're knocking and making that real. And if afterwards we go back and we send postcard follow-ups. We say, great talking with you, and getting a handwritten note in the mail, I think that just changes the way people think, changes their interaction. And so in everything I do, I try to do it in a way that shows people that they can trust in their government. And if you don't vote for me, it's fine. I still represent you. I'm not one of those people that only cares about the people that voted for them. And if that's how you act in government, then you shouldn't be in government. We got to defeat those people. There is real evil out there, and there is real structural sin, and we are enmeshed in it, and we need to fight it, and we need to win. And part of how we do that is by rebuilding those connections.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that's part of what we do as the Faith Space is leadership development. It seems like that's part of your leadership style as well, as building those collaborations, those partnerships.
Yeah, community. It's the idea. Yeah, I try. I do my best. Put myself on everything that's out there. Nobody ever calls. Sometimes I don't respond to emails and text messages as quickly as I wish I would. I could do better. I could always do better. That's humility.
That's the humility
always
part.
Get the humility. I could be better. Yeah.
Can we ask you just a couple rapid
lightning round? Let's go.
Lightning round.
Yeah.
So it's like complete the sentence.
Oh, okay. I can't see that far without my glasses. So
my relationship with Jesus is
complex and ever evolving.
Okay. Best bill I sponsored last session.
Full day kindergarten for every Colorado kid. No question on that one.
My favorite Bible verse or story.
Parable of the Good Samaritan.
Least favorite Bible verse or story.
Least favorite.
Oh, come on. You've got to have a list of these too, right? Is it? You like the whole thing?
The whole thing is so good.
It's called the good book for a reason.
There's actually so much in there that's really messed up that it's kind of hard to pick, like, what's the one most messed up thing in there? The misreading I think people have of Paul when he's such a contextual writer, and so many folks take what he says out of context and use it to do really unchristian things to other people. I'm talking about LGBTQ equality here, in case that wasn't clear.
What I wish people knew about me.
Well, I wish when those people call and treat me like... So when you're an elected official, people sort of forget that you're a person, and they just treat you like you're just a politician. And I wish people would remember that I'm a person too, and they can have a real person connection with me, and that we're all humans. We're all doing our best. I wish they would remember that I'm a human. I breathe. I put my pants on one leg at a time.
Right. Well, and you've talked about love. You've talked about grief, family. You've talked about calling and leadership, and that is human to everyone. That's innate within all of us. Thank you so much for your time, for your energy, for your intention and investment in being a spiritual leader in a very different realm in your faith space.
My faith space.
In the Colorado State Senate chambers.
Do you have any last words for our audience, especially aspiring leaders, what might you have wanted to know or needed to know when you started this journey?
To quote Bill and Ted, be excellent to each other.
Okay.
Is that good?
That's good.
That's a good wrap up?
That's excellent.
Come on, what's better than Bill and Ted? That's how every interview should end.
And so to our listeners out there, may you go in peace. May you continue to lead in whatever leadership capacity you find yourself in. May you continue to serve with your full heart and with your full intention to do good in this world. Remember that you are a blessing and you are blessed.